The information I got is that they were actually had them out. They were talking to them. They were at the front of our Tahoe, and they were actually talking to them. Brandon on one side, Bill on the other side.
First, the chief says here they had them out, and they were talking to them, as in plural, meaning Jerry Kane and Joe Kane. However, this doesn't fit with what the video shows whatsoever. Jerry and Joe Kane were never out at the same time, being talked to by Evans and Paudert.
They were at the front of our Tahoe, and they were actually talking to them. Brandon on one side, Bill on the other side, and they were just in some type of discussion when the guy in the back started shooting.
They were in some type of discussion, says the chief. Quote, they were in some type of discussion when the guy in the back started shooting. Who is this guy in the back, and where did he start shooting from, Chief? Was this guy in the back of the van? Or was this guy in the back of everyone shooting from behind the scene where everyone was? That's not very specific.
And they were just in some type of discussion when the guy in the back started shooting. And that's what, and I don't even think they knew he was on. They didn't know anything about the guy in the car. You know, they just knew it was a young boy, 16-year-old boy.
And how can they know that it is a 16-year-old boy in the van if they, quote, knew nothing about the guy in the car, as the chief stated?
And that's what, and I don't even think they knew he was on. They didn't know anything about the guy in the car. You know, they just knew it was a young boy, 16-year-old boy.
I find it quite curious that originally the chief's statements made it sound as if there were 3 people involved in the initial shooting. 2 people that Brandon Paudert and Bill Evans were out talking to, supposedly, and 1 person in the back. And I don't know what in the back means, in the back of the van or in the back of the group of people. Could be either or. That's not specific whatsoever. As well, it's also interesting how the chief goes here from saying that they, quote, knew nothing about the guy in the car to saying that they just knew that it was a boy, a 16-year-old boy. Well, if they had them out and they were talking to them, then that means plural. That would mean that Jerry Kane and his son would have to be out of the van talking to officers Paudert and Evans. Now, going from there, then all of a sudden there's a guy in the back of the van, and they didn't know anything about the guy in the back of the van. That implies that there are 3 people, and this could possibly be stemming from the initial report that the police were following. Supposedly they were looking for 3 suspects rather than 2 suspects, and as well, originally they were looking for Hispanics rather than white people. They don't get into any details about the Hispanics here. However, if you check the actual stories for yourself, you will find out that originally they were looking for Hispanic people.
They just knew it was a young boy, 16-year-old boy.
And he was in the passenger seat? And he was in the passenger seat?
No, I find it pretty weird that after the chief makes that mistake and fumbles his words, in comes the reporter to save the day after the chief says that the guy in the back started shooting, and after saying that they knew nothing about the guy in the car. However, they then knew that it was a 16-year-old boy, which makes no sense. So the chief is stumbling a bit here, and conveniently enough, the reporter comes up with the question, and he was in the passenger seat. Now, nobody has said anything about anybody in the passenger seat up until this point. The chief never mentioned anybody in the passenger seat. He said that they had them out, they were talking to them, etc., etc. Where does this notion of somebody coming from the passenger seat even come in? I don't understand that at all. It seems to me like this is convenient questioning by this reporter here, possibly to get the story back on track. We must also be keeping in mind here that there is no way for this reporter to know that anything happened from the passenger seat. However, 36 days later, when the dash cam videos are released, that is indeed where the fire is coming from. How is this possible? Nobody had seen the videos at that point. How is it possible that anybody knew where the shooting was coming from.
And he was in the passenger seat?
I'm not sure where he was when he started shooting.
Wrong, Chief. Not what you told us earlier. Let's have another look at that, shall we?
And they were just in some type of discussion when the guy in the back started shooting. I'm not sure where he was when he started shooting. And they were just in some type of discussion when the guy in the back started shooting.
Back to the Chief.
And he was in the passenger seat?
I'm not sure where he was when he started shooting, but I know he was a 16-year-old kid. You know, I stop cars out here. I stop them by myself all the time.
Chief, what's going on here? What do you mean? Who asked you this question? What do you mean by interrupting your own statement saying, yeah, I stop cars out here, I stop them all the time? What brought that segue on? Could this possibly be further evidence of the Chief fumbling the story? I think it might be.
But I know he was a 16-year-old kid. You know, I stop cars out here. I stop them by myself all the time, which I shouldn't do. But, you know, you see a 16-year-old boy with his dad, you don't think he's going to do anything. You're way more worried about the father than you are the son. The father's supposed to be in control. You got the one that's in control out you're talking to, and you feel like you've got the main one there.
Now, again, earlier the Chief said that they had them out and they were talking to them, as in plural. Now here the Chief is back to saying that they had the main one out. You have the main one there, being the father he's referring to, and that does not indicate that they were out talking to them. That indicates that there is one person out of the vehicle.
You got the one that's in control out you're talking to, and you feel like you've got the main one there.
Mr. Sadler said they had pushed Bill Evans down. How do they know?
Well, there's some indication, and I don't know how they know, but he did say that the Bill was on his left, and Bill was on his left or right. Anyway, he pushed Bill.
So which one is it, Chief? Is he on his left or his right? And by the way, that was a little slick cover up there if you didn't notice that afterwards. But anyway, and then move on to the next thing. So I can't remember if he was on his left or right, because this whole thing is a scam.
And it's a slope, and he pushed Bill down the hill, and he threw him off balance. And when he got him away, that's when that young man opened fire. Not a young man. That's when that savage opened fire on Bill and shot him in the back and massacred him.
Notice here that the Chief makes it a point to correct himself from referring to Joe as a young man to referring to Joe as a savage and saying that he massacred Bill Evans. These little verbal recoveries are key to notice in situations of this kind. The reason that noticing these little slip-ups and corrections is so important is because the fact that they're making these corrections in the words that they choose to use shows that they're trying to run a smear campaign and simply demonize Jerry and Joe Kane. And the reason that it's so important that we notice that they're trying to demonize Jerry Kane and Joe Kane to such an extent is because they have no true evidence of a shooting taking place. They have dash cam videos that were released 41 days after the incident. That's 41 days too late.